This new generation just doesn't want to work. When I was your age, I busted ass at McDonald's for a summer and bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath beach house.
Boomers live a much different life than Gen Z has been able to. I know, they absolutely hate to admit that, but it's actually very apparent when you pay close attention to the hours spent working and the money coming in for said work. Nowadays, you only need 2 to 3 of those minimum wage jobs just to stay ahead or get afloat. But believe it or not, just a few decades ago, you could actually support a whole family just off of one income. But it's almost like they kind of want us to forget about that or something. Now, I'm not saying we should all just get together and storm the old folks' home and rob Granny of her social security check. But I am saying that after seeing a couple of comments, some of you older folks who've been seeing my videos just don't really seem to understand the message. So let's make it a little more clear for the folks in the back that have had to suffer the existence of fate a little longer than I've had to. If you like videos discussing the downfall of society and different topics like this, social norms, societal issues, feel free to like, comment your thoughts, opinions below, and subscribe to see my daily uploads around here discussing topics just like this shit. Now, let's begin today's shit show, shall we?
Boomers had a way different experience than us. This home behind me sold for $416,000, which is right at the national average. But in 1980, this exact home sold for the national average of $47,000. Median income in 1980 was $21,000. Median income today is $71,000. So in 1980, if you were the average family, you could buy this home for just over 2 times your income. So if you were the average household today, it would cost you nearly 6 times your income to buy this same exact house. So yes, I agree. Boomers had a very different experience because the average person could buy the average house then. But nowadays, the average person cannot afford anything near the average. Even today, with inflated prices, boomers have that rolled over equity that they've had for the last 40, 50 years. Because that house that they bought in 1980 for $47,000, they just sold for near $500,000. But I can't help but to think, in the future, will our kids look at us and say, you bought that house for just 6 times your income? I need 20 times my income. Like, follow, and comment what your thoughts are, because this market, it only seems to be getting crazier.
Now, buying power, and especially in terms of housing prices, is probably one of the most significant, noticeable increases over the last few decades, being that, boomers had quite a good fair, show for that type of thing, and that angle of things, being in the buyer's side versus now Gen Z millennials, we're kind of getting the brunt end of the stick. It's not really looking too good at the end of the day. And the boomers will like to say, well, we had higher percentages. Well, an 18% on like a, $50,000 home, $100,000 home is nowhere near a 13% on a $500,000 home, or even a 7 or 8% on a $500,000 home. Still does not really equal out when the initial amount is just so much higher. The percentages, doesn't really matter how low they are, you're still not really getting a fair wage. Now, we're going to actually go into the differences and how much you're actually getting paid, and how much buying power you have in other aspects of life, not just housing, but housing is probably one of the most severe topics in terms of how Gen Z, millennials, younger adults kind of look down, or they kind of like shun older folks because they had such an easy get into some of these houses and systems, some of these spots, but we don't really ever even have that advantage at all to even be in those positions to get these places for so cheap or for such a reasonable price in terms of how much we're getting paid for our income. Now it's so out of the water where it's like owning a home with a backyard, or even owning your home at all, doesn't really seem reasonable. But now we're going to go in, that's even kind of deep diving into the whole idea of ownership, which at the end of the day, do you really own anything, or are you just borrowing it for your time on earth? Because even if you don't pay bills, if you don't pay your tickets, and they can ticket you for anything, it's only a matter of time before they start taking your assets, and you really don't own too much. Even if you do pay off all your home, you're still paying property tax, so taxation keeps you in the chains and locks until the end of time, no matter what. So, just a crazy idea.
Generation is so out of touch with what the going rate for everything.
I visited my parents for the first time in about 3 years over the holidays, and they sat me down really seriously and told me that my grandmother had set aside some money for me, and it was supposed to be for, a big moment in my life, like when I got married or bought a house. They said that when she passed away, she had kind of told them specifically that she wanted the money to go towards like a significant moment in my life to be kind of like a help to me. Now, I got married over the pandemic, and as most people my age know, I'm not going to be buying a house anytime soon, even with my partner. So they were kind of debating, like, as they were sitting down, whether or not they should give me the money or if they should wait, because it was supposed to be for like something important. Now I'm sitting here like, okay, how much money are we talking about? Because if it's a significant amount of money, then maybe I can plan for something in the future, plan for a big step like this. So I was like, how much money are we talking? And guess how much money they were talking about after sitting there like debating in front of me whether or not to give it to me, whether or not it was going to help with my eventual purchase of a house. Guess how much money they were talking about? $1,500. My plane ticket to visit them cost $1,000. It cost me $300 to ship the Christmas gifts they got me back to my house. And they were debating over giving me $1,500 because it might help me buy a house.
Now, the reason why this video makes so much sense to put, at least in the beginning of this video that we're talking about here today, is the just insane drastic difference in idealship around money. $1,500 was supposed to be some big expense. It was supposed to be just held on to for a special time, a big occasion. Buying a house, a wedding, any of these things that should cost like, you know, a couple of $1,000s, maybe even, you know, 5 digits, like $10,000 plus. $1,500 in modern day 2025, depending on where you live, if you live anywhere close to cities or in a city at all, you're definitely barely even going to be able to afford 1 month of rent, utilities, groceries, all that. It's really not doing much. Even if you're working a bare minimum wage job at McDonald's for part-time, you're probably making more than $1,500 a month. So this just goes to show how only over a course of a generation or two generations, the idea of money has completely shifted. And the idea of $1,500 being a lot of money is just kind of ridiculous if you really think about that, because it's really nothing these days. I mean, it is if someone just handed you or handed me $1,500, if it just got wired into my bank account, I'd be happy. It'd be the best day of my life. It'd be like winning the jackpot lottery at the casino today. But in the really grand scheme of things, it's not going to last that long. How much can you really do with that small set amount of money? And even now, when I do like my gig work jobs, my mother, who's like 65 years old, when I tell her I get paid like $300 or something for doing like some like gig work jobs, that seems like a lot to her. But like realistically, $300 is only like a day or two amount like valued work, you know, for the average day in terms of like inflation and cost of all the stuff it costs you to make that money, all that stuff. When you really do the breakdowns, not really, the money's just not really the same, and this is a really big show for the difference here.
They like to make their kids feel guilty. They like to go, you could never afford it. They like to tell you how cheap the house was when they bought it, and then this is every Thanksgiving or Christmas, somebody will go, pick this up for $200,000. Now it's worth 1.8. Yeah. And then it's their millennial kids are sitting there saddled with student loan debt, and the boomers are it's their last fuck you before they leave the planet.
Yeah.
They're a spiteful generation of monsters. I respect it. But their last fuck you before they leave the planet is, instead of selling their houses for, I don't know, a $900,000 profit, they just won't put them on the market. Some boomers, which is hilarious, that we read the articles on my show, they're actually retiring to bigger houses. They're sizing up. It's sick. And our kids are going to come here every year, and they're going to suffer through the size of our house with 9 empty bedrooms while they live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we're gonna chastise them for their decisions and their choices.
And that was Tim Dillon on the JRE podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, and obviously we've probably all heard that or at least seen that before. But I really like how Tim Dillon breaks down the whole, you know, mental ship of and I really do like how Tim Dillon breaks down the relationship between the younger generations and the older generations. He specifies them as boomers, Gen Z, millennials, but this really is the difference between the generations that are just at peak right now, battling against each other constantly, whether that's online or in real life. You've probably seen it in your own personal life, your own real life experiences, you know, past the screen, not just behind the camera here. But at the end of the day, it's just like, it's not really a good relationship to have with your parents when you're just barking at each other back and forth. Why aren't you doing as good as we were doing? You had a lot easier than we did. We'll never have the same priorities or the same sort of things you had going for you. It's always a back and forth type of thing. I'm sorry, I'm not really good with hand puppets. That was probably a bad analogy, but I'm sure you got the point. But yeah, you know, it's just sad to think how the whole economy, the whole, you know, societal issues, it's just kind of breaking down the family structure. And now it's like, it's really me versus you versus me. Instead of, it's like, you know, maybe when your parents dies, if you're really nice with them, maybe you can inherit this big 9-bedroom house, but maybe this still won't be paid off, and then you'll end up having to sell it. And we've all heard, I don't know if you ever heard this, but it's not always just a blessing to get inherited a bunch of stuff or a house or something. It might be more than you're willing to handle. It might be more than you really want to take on. So, you know, just put that into perspective here, where it's like, it's crazy. But the whole college debt thing, the way all our expenses are these days, it's just not equal to the way the boomers are living. So, with that being in perspective, it feels as if not everybody from either side of the aisle can really see each other's side.
We've gone down the rabbit hole of buying power and wages and where wages were. In 1971, I believe minimum wage was $1.81 an hour. A 40-hour week was like $76 a week. Gold was $44 an ounce. So literally, your weekly salary, if you were working for minimum wage in 1971 and you worked 40 hours a week was 1.7 roughly ounces of gold, which today would be just under $6,000 a week. Think about that.
That's $300K a year.
Yep.
And that's a minimum wage job.
In other words,
that's how it works out.
I actually had a slight little disagreement and back and forth. I wouldn't call it an argument, but a small debate in my own comment sections on one of my last two videos with an older gentleman, I think it was a gentleman, with a boomer, discussing how Gen Z is lazy. We just have it so easy, and, you know, we just don't really understand how easy it is now compared to them. When if you look down the difference, at least in terms of the economic state and the buying power that you have as a young adult versus the young adults only, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, which seems like a long time, but really time goes by fast. Not that long ago. There's still people around. Your parents are these ages, so not that long if you really think about it and put it into real life perspective here. You're going to get there one day. It's just not really the same. And the whole 40-hour is a full-time work week. That's because you could actually live off 40 hours. I've had many people in my comments saying like, oh, 40 hours is nothing. You should be working 80 hours, 100 hours plus. I had to live with mice and a car that broke down every 3 blocks. You know what I mean? I'm not saying there's no reward in the sacrifice, and there definitely is a lot of humble, you know, winnings in, you know, having to sacrifice all this stuff and living a lackluster, low life, you know, to potentially get to these higher steps and the, you know, glory of living the high life. But at the same time, this isn't a flex. I mean, the fact that this has, now it's like 10 times the struggle to get to the high life. So it's like, if you put that into perspective, it's good you're there, but let's not look back on people behind you and say, oh, I already did what you did. Well, maybe you're not really looking from their view, from their angle, and that's why young folks feel like they're not being heard. But this has kind of always been the case, where the older folks, when they were young, their parents looked down on them, said, oh, we had it harder. You know, we had the wars, we had all this. Now it's like they had and now our parents say, oh, we had the 2008 bubble burst. We had the economic collapse. So now when we're older, we're going to say, oh, we had COVID. We had the pandemic. Everything was closed down for 3, 4, 5 years. That's going to be our excuse. So let's just wonder what the next excuse will be and what the government's going to give us to make this next generation have their own new excuse. Because there always is one at the end of the day, let's just be honest. And yeah, my friends, it's going to wrap up today's video discussing the entitled boomers not being able to understand the lazy, lackluster working force of Gen Z and how they're just clashing against each other nonstop to create a economic downfall that eventually the boomers are going to have to give all their stuff to the Gen Zs, or the Gen Zs will take it off to the boomers. Whichever perspective you have, feel free to let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Definitely is a war we have going on inside our heads, inside our societies, inside our economy. It's definitely is real, but definitely I think gets more propagandized the more the interwebs, online, internet discourse gets a hold of it. But either way, I'll love to know all your guys' thoughts, opinions down below in the comments, whether, no matter what age you are, whether you're in Gen Z or, you know, millennial, boomers, maybe you're a Gen Alpha, maybe you're a Gen X, maybe there's other people watching. There's always generations. I don't mean to not call you out. And a huge shout out to everybody who goes above and beyond to check out those links down below in the description. Every donation link is amazing. You can send a couple dollars towards the Ramen Noodle Fund. Definitely goes a long way. Before I get my paychecks at the end of the month, I'm always doing it. I'm always paycheck to paycheck, just like everybody else around here. As well as huge shout out to everybody who wants to check the behind the scenes stuff. You can check out all that stuff down below on the Patreon and see more of me, my life, talk to me personally, 24/7, 365. For as low as $1 a month. It is free, but if you want to talk to me, it's like $1 a month. So definitely appreciate that. I reply right away. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I hope you see you in the next one. And bye. This is the end of the video. So this is where we like roll the credits. Cut. It's just me turning the camera off.